Welcome to The Explainer. We're taking on something incredibly fascinating today. We are going to dismantle that classic Hollywood stereotype of intelligence, the eccentric, loud know-it-all, and replace it with the actual verified findings from cognitive psychology. We all tend to think we know exactly how highly intelligent people act, but as you'll see, the science tells a remarkably different and much more nuanced story. Let me ask you a question right off the bat. When you picture a highly intelligent person in your mind, what do they actually look like? If you're like most of us, you're probably imagining someone who's super loud, constantly confident, and honestly kind of performing their intellect for the room, just making sure everyone knows they're the smartest person there. But is that really what a high IQ looks like in practice?
Well, there's a huge gap between that cultural expectation and reality. Decades of cognitive research show us that a high IQ doesn't just make you smarter in a straightforward way. It fundamentally rewires how you process the whole world. And fascinatingly, these cognitive differences often look like the exact opposite of traditional intelligence. Instead of loud and always right, the reality is often quiet, anxious, self-doubting, and deeply observant.
To really unpack this, we're going to walk through 5 key areas today: the restless inner engine, hidden emotional depths, navigating a slower world, humility and the output gap, and finally, living in high resolution. Let's get right into it. Chapter 1. The restless inner engine. We're starting with the actual, literal neuroscience of a high IQ. You know how highly intelligent people often prefer to be alone? It's not because they're antisocial. It's actually a strict neurological requirement. According to neuroscientist Rex Jung's research at the University of New Mexico, a highly intelligent brain features much richer connectivity between distant regions. It's basically processing a massive network of ideas all at once. For the prefrontal cortex to handle that complex reasoning without distraction, it literally demands profound quiet. So solitude isn't loneliness here, it's cognitive fuel. And that brings us to the fact that these minds basically never turn off. Not when they're trying to relax, and definitely not late at night. The psychologist Kazimir Dombrowski extensively studied gifted individuals and coined this fantastic term, psychomotor overexcitability. Sounds intense, right? It just validates that the brain isn't malfunctioning. It's just this relentless internal energy, constantly building theories, running mental simulations. It simply lacks a natural off switch. Now, what happens if that restless engine doesn't get the right fuel? Rapid boredom. And listen, this isn't an attitude problem. Research links higher cognitive ability to a high baseline of dopamine activity in the brain. They habituate to familiar routines so incredibly fast that when an intellectual challenge disappears, their dopamine drops sharply. They have a true physiological need for novel input just to maintain the baseline engagement that the rest of us get from standard everyday routines. Moving on to Chapter 2, Hidden Emotional Depths, Feeling the World Intensely. Okay, we really need to bust a massive myth here. The idea of the cold, detached, robotic genius. A study in the journal Intelligence confirms exactly what Dombrowski noted. High IQ brains feel things with way more intensity and emotional reactivity than the average person. They have this heightened sensitivity to art, moral questions, and human suffering. They aren't detached at all. Their emotional world is incredibly rich and intensely felt, even if they've learned to mask it outwardly. And here's where it gets really interesting. That emotional depth connects directly to persistent self-doubt. You'd think being super smart brings total confidence, right? Nope, it's the opposite. It's the high-end Dunning-Kruger effect. As psychologist Albert Ellis observed, intelligent people hold themselves to impossibly strict standards. It's like the deeper your understanding gets, the more precisely you see the vast, unexplored territory of what you don't know. So, genuine doubt? It's actually a highly reliable signature of intelligence. Let's look at Chapter 3, Navigating a Slower World. This is all about the social disconnect. So, how does this restless, emotional engine interact with people? Often with a bit of a struggle. Psychologist Leda Hollingsworth spent decades on this and called it stimulus poverty. We really need to reframe this trait. When a high IQ person seems aloof, it's rarely arrogance. It's a reaction to conversations that just stay way too much on the surface. They have this quiet longing for real, bottomless conversation. They hold back because the environment isn't offering that intellectual challenge, not because they dislike the people around them. Look at this beautifully counterintuitive finding from the London School of Economics. For the average person, more socializing equals more life satisfaction. But for highly intelligent people, they report lower satisfaction from frequent socializing because their brains process every single layer of a room, which makes small talk at a networking event literal kryptonite for them. Socializing is incredibly cognitively expensive. Their primary way to recharge absolutely has to be stillness and solitude. Because of that, in group settings, you'll notice they often default to observation over expression. And again, society totally misreads this. We usually assume the quiet person has the least to contribute. But actually, scratch that. It's a highly active observation process. They are gathering massive amounts of social data, accurately reading subtle cues and underlying tensions, and figuring out what isn't being said before they ever decide to act. Which brings us to Chapter 4, Humility and the Output Gap. Actions and Execution. You know what an absolute hallmark of a highly intelligent mind is? Cognitive flexibility. They treat their beliefs as working theories, not fixed identities. When new contradictory evidence pops up, they don't feel threatened. They instantly update their mental models. It's a continuous, honest update process toward accuracy. That's exactly why being totally comfortable saying, "I don't know," is a sign of profound precision, not hesitation. But this exact precision creates a massive roadblock when it comes to getting things done. Carol Dweck identified this as complexity awareness. It's a wild, paralyzing cycle. Step 1. You envision a flawless outcome. Step 2, you immediately comprehend the massive scope required to pull it off. Step 3, you become terrified of the gap between your perfect vision and the flawed reality. And Step 4, paralyzing procrastination. They don't procrastinate out of laziness, folks. It's because they simply care too much. Okay, let's tie all this together in Chapter 5, Living in High Resolution, the final synthesis. I absolutely love this observation from psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi because it perfectly captures that quiet, persistent sense of not quite belonging. And to be clear, this isn't alienation or some social deficiency. It's simply the entirely predictable result of experiencing the world at a vastly different level of resolution than the people around you. When your inner life is universally described as this complex, it's just really, really hard to share. And because of that different resolution, society consistently misreads these traits. Think about it. Their vital need for solitude is perceived as antisocial. Their brilliant constant thinking is diagnosed as mere anxiety. Their deep emotional capacity is brushed off as oversensitivity. Their precise self-doubt is seen as uncertainty. And their careful observation is mistaken for having nothing to add. But the brain isn't broken. It's simply processing more, connecting more, and going further. Which brings us to the absolute core takeaway of this whole explainer. A high IQ is not some magic superpower of perfect output and loud confidence. At its core, intelligence is experiencing the full complexity of the world with almost zero filter between you and it. It's demanding, it can be totally exhausting, but it is a beautifully high-resolution way of experiencing reality. So I'm going to leave you with a provocative question to chew on today. If high intelligence is genuinely more about this profound, high-resolution experience rather than flawless, confident performance, how can we better support the quiet, complex minds in our own lives? Or perhaps, how can you better support yourself? Thank you so much for joining me and engaging with this explainer today. Keep learning, keep observing, and I'll see you next time.